Okay, we are live. Hey. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Holy Humanist. Today, we have a very special guest with us. As you can see, he's already here. I've been waiting for this conversation for a very long time. So, Secular Rarity, aka Elliot, welcome to Holy Humanist.
Thank you so much. I told you just before we got on how thrilled I am too. I've watched so many things from you, and you always have such great stuff. So it's just awesome to be here and chatting about God and heathenry. And honestly, the title was fantastic. I love that. I love what you came up with, the heaven and hell and being heathen. With that, that sounds like a perfect Friday night for me. So
I was just going to say, doesn't this sound like your perfect, well, for me, Sunday night, but I wouldn't
yeah,
spend it any other way. No, but honestly, I've seen some of your videos on YouTube as well, and I just kind of like love the energy. Usually it's very, just kind of laid back, but you have so much to say, and I love kind of the stuff that you touch on. And when you do say, can we just talk about this for a second? Because this is something that really annoys me. I love it. I'm like, yes, there's going to be some education thrown in here. Okay, but today we're basically going to pretty much just get to know Secular Rarity a bit more, especially for my viewers that might have not come across any of your stuff. So we are going to probably start right from the top and go through your journey a little bit and have some fun along the way. And we're more than happy to take questions when and as Elliot and I are speaking. And if we've got time, we'll do more of a Q&A at the end. But just before we begin, I do want to bring a bit of attention to what Secular Spirit and I were discussing on his stream yesterday. So a lot of you might be aware, but there is an initiative which is meant to be for the month of December, but we kind of want to get the ball rolling now in November for our very first ex-Muslim awareness month. So yeah, I think it's a very good idea. Some people on a Reddit or a subreddit came up with it, and it's effectively to counter Islamophobia. Oh God, I can't even say that. Islamophobia Awareness Month, okay, which actually is in December. So if you haven't already, please do check out Haram Doodles on Instagram. She is absolutely fantastic, and she's kind of put a picture out about what's happening. So again, it's all about learning why Muslims do leave Islam. And she's basically saying that this is our right after Muslim month, or aka Islamophobia Awareness Month in November, but we're starting to make some noise. So if you have any stories, please do share them with her. She'll turn it into an amazing illustration. And as I said yesterday, pictures speak 1,000 words. And the theme of this year is that ex-Muslims are here, we exist, and we're not going anywhere. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of get that out of the way. There's two hashtags in particular, hashtag ex-Muslim awareness month and hashtag ex-Muslims are here 2022. So if we can kind of get that going on Twitter, that would be amazing. But yeah, okay, that's the housekeeping out of the way. Back to Secular Rarity. So welcome. And you were the first. So I've had a couple of conversations with people that used to be various denominations of Christian and then left behind their faith. But when we were talking, I was like, oh, I've never come across somebody who is an ex-Methodist. And welcome to an ignorant ex-Muslim channel. My knowledge about the various Christian denominations sucks. But I wanted to ask you, so like, can we start with what really is Methodism and how is it different from the other Christian doctrines? So I'll tell you two little facts that I know.
Okay.
Salvation is for everybody, according to Methodists, whereas some Christian denominations like Calvinists think that salvation is only for God's chosen people. And then the other thing that I read was just that for Methodists, it's more about a actions speak louder than words kind of approach. So, but yeah, you take it away. Tell us what it's all about.
So first off, definitely don't feel bad about having trouble kind of parsing out the different Christian denominations. Trust me, after many years of talking with many different Christians, they have trouble themselves. So, but the one of the biggest advances in Christian theology was long before Methodism came around, where just basically we finally had this idea that you don't have to go through the elite, you don't have to go through the hierarchy and the preachers, that actually you as an individual are able to understand the message from God through Jesus and accept that salvation, yada yada. So that was the whole big Martin Luther thing with the Protestant Reformation, right? But from there, more and more Protestants started taking that upon themselves even more. And this guy, John Wesley, comes around and he starts going, well, you got some of this right, but there's a little bit of this other stuff you got wrong. And exactly what you pointed out, the difference between the Calvinists and a lot of the other Christian denominations, that was one of the biggest things for him. It was that the Calvinists have this belief that before anybody is even born, God has already picked out the people that are going to be tortured forever, and God has picked out the people that are going to be good forever. And there's just nothing you can do. You can be a terrible person your whole life, criticize God, reject the Holy Spirit, all of that blasphemy and whatnot. But if God already picked you to go to heaven, you're just going to heaven. So suck it up. So the Methodists definitely didn't like that. And they wanted to try and preach this understanding more in line with basically through your faith alone, you can get this salvation, right? That means that you can lose it as well, which again was something that wasn't the case in the Calvinist understanding, right? If you walked away at any point in time from a Calvinist understanding, it was because you were never actually elected. You were always a bad person, right? It's a nice little retcon they do at the end there just to make it all, tie up real nice for them. But the Methodists had this belief that, basically by being a true believer, by really, really having the faith that you're supposed to have, you would start acting in such a way that was these good works that you would see throughout life, right? Helping people, being nice, charity, yada, yada, whatever. And so that was kind of a demonstration that you had enough faith. Now, again, they also believed that you could lose that. So it was like, okay, well, if you start being a bad person or bad stuff happens to you or whatever, then it's like, oh, okay, cool. You were never truly a part of it, or you stepped away and lost it.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of BS explanations there. But what's really funny is the vast majority these days of Methodist denominations in the United States are generally more on that progressive-y, liberally side. But I definitely remember this was always when I really knew that I was a Methodist, because it wasn't until these moments that we ever really harped on the fact that we were Methodist. But it was the moments when we would point out the Baptists and just be like, oh yeah, they do that a little bit weird. They're one of those Presbyterians. And it's like, oh, okay. And they don't believe in Jesus. And it's like, no, they do. They just do it wrong. And it's like, oh, okay, whatever. But the Methodists were originally called that because of the strict, methodical way that they would preach the gospel, right? And even still to this day, which is always a fun little fact, the Methodists have their own hymnal with just our big book of just church songs and Jesus songs and whatnot.
Are they nice at least? Are they fun to sing?
So no, not really. These are a lot more in that old or Catholic liturgy, monk chanty things. That's the majority of them. But because of kind of where he was, there's a few of them that are a bit more kind of on the upbeaty side. But we never really went as far as some of the evangelical Baptist churches and stuff that have 2 drum sets and 6 guitars or whatever.
Where the real party's at. Yeah,
right. Those people know how to party. I actually went to a Baptist church with a girlfriend of mine when I was much younger, and we're sitting in the pews, and some light piano starts going, and I'm like, okay, this is familiar to me. I've had this happen while the pastor is reading from the Bible or whatever. But out of nowhere, 6 people that had been sitting in the congregation the whole time stand up with microphones and just start singing, and it just tripped me out. I was like, oh my God, are they supposed to be doing that? Because that was not at all what I was used to. But we
True.
we we kind of rode that line of the strict, just singing the hymns versus, we'll add just a little bit of, this in there. I ended up playing drums for a little while. That was one of the things that kept me in the church longer, was playing music. I did drums and handbells. If you ever seen those massive big brass bells, like,
Yes.
yeah, they're lots of fun to play, but
Are they difficult to play? 'Cause
not terribly difficult. I think the biggest difficulty is when you're playing a piece of music that requires you to span a really large section of bells. So if you're
Sure.
taking a whole octave or two, you've got a lot of bells in front of you, and so it's just like placing them correctly and making sure that you can grab them in time. I've
Oh,
talked
wow.
about doing an atheist handbell choir, but you'd be surprised how expensive they are. They get pricey quick, but
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing though.
yeah, yeah, it
That's what
would be
I
fun. It would be
want.
fun. Get some atheist hymns or something. I don't know, holy,
Yeah.
holy Satan or something. I don't know.
No, they're not gonna call us Satanists.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They'll call us terrible things either way.
Anyway, yes.
But
Makes a
yeah,
change from rapist, but
it
sure.
it definitely, when I was growing up, it was a lot more of like the idea of apologetics wasn't ever brought up. Nobody ever really tried to uh, bring some archaeology to me and be like, oh my gosh, we found Noah's Ark or something. I really didn't hear any of that until I was outside of the faith. And one of the biggest reasons is, again, just kind of back to that main doctrine with John Wesley, was that, hey, it's kind of about your faith, right? And it's really, really focused on how much you believe. Well, I just believed. And if somebody had a problem, if they were like, yeah, but how do you explain like the problem of evil? I'd be like, oh, well, there is no problem because God's got it. God's taking care of everything. Like,
Yeah.
why are you concerned about? Why would you be wondering this question? It's like, oh, well, I just think it doesn't really make logical sense. And it's like, God doesn't have to make logical sense. It's God. When
Precisely.
Yeah, when I actually finally started trying to get answers to some of these questions, it was like, oh, yeah, these are not good answers. And it really was just the fact that there was a block in my head when it came to these types of questions. Somebody wanted to have a 40-minute debate on, why or why not to speed in a 30 mile an hour. Fine, no problem. We'll spend
Yeah.
hours and hours. I was on the debate team in high school, spent lots of time researching, coming up with arguments, understanding the fallacies and all that jazz. And it was just anytime it came to this, and someone would be like, yeah, but what's the demonstration that we have a soul that can go to heaven or hell? I was like, oh, God's the demonstration. And they're like, right, but like, how do you demonstrate God? And I was like, oh, it's the Bible. Like, it's just here. It's done.
Yeah.
We've already solved this. Um,
You had it
so
all figured out, Elliot, like
I,
the
I,
perfect amount of blind faith,
yeah,
circular reasoning. It's all
yeah.
going on, like the perfect mind of a believer,
That's
essentially.
honestly, and that's what cracks me up sometimes about some of these really intense understandings and reasonings for these things that don't seem to make sense. Because a lot of times what I hear is when somebody actually walks through it all, we go through 20 steps and we talk about it for 40 minutes, and then it gets back to the same place, which is, well, I just leave it up to God. Like, I don't know. God just takes care of it. It's like, right, right, right. Why couldn't you have just gotten there in the first step? Because that's what your answer is at the end of the day. And once you recognize that that's what all the answers are for all of these religions, all of these supernatural claims and stuff, once you just realize that, then you start to have to ask yourself, is that a good reason to believe something? And the answer just
Hell
is,
no.
yeah, it just isn't,
Yeah.
like, it feels good because you feel like you have all the answers, right? You're like, oh, it's taken care of, God. But again, it doesn't actually explain anything. It doesn't actually answer anything. So
Yeah, and you're right. It definitely feels good. You feel like you're almost
mhm,
empowered as you say
mhm,
that when you're a believer, like even if you do see injustice or the problem of evil crosses your mind in the view of like poverty or something,
mm,
or like hearing a terrible story, you're like, okay, well, if not in this life, in the next life, God's got it all sorted. He's got a
right,
plan, that there's a justice system in place. Like, we're just mere mortals. What do we know? But it's
right.
so interesting, like across the board, whether I'm talking to you right now, you may as well be like, a Muslim that I was
Mm,
talking to at the
mhm,
time, because it's the same cognitive pattern that we're like stuck in.
yep,
And even what you were describing right now seems a lot like the Muslim equivalent of Allah knows best.
mhm,
And also, just when you're talking about like, coming from looking at it from a Methodist angle, and then being like, oh, they worship Jesus too, but like slightly differently.
mm.
It's a breath of fresh air, because it sounds very much like the Sunni Shia thing, and like
Yeah,
what all of
yeah,
the Islamic sects do as well to one another. We have mad polarizations, but then sometimes it's like, yeah, they're on the right track there, but they don't pray
mhm,
with their hands in the right place.
mhm.
Um,
It was a really, so one of the big things that the Methodists do, is they regularly move the pastors around. And so
oh,
it's not common for a Methodist preacher to stay at a certain church for more than a couple of years max.
oh,
When I was younger, we had a pastor that had stayed with the church for, I don't know, about 7 or 8 years.
yeah,
And we continually voted and we said, oh my gosh, we really like this guy. He was actually the individual that ended up baptizing me, because
okay.
normally as a Methodist, you get baptized very early, which is where they say a magic spell over some water and then they throw it on a baby. I mean, there's probably more to baptism, but that's the basic points. But
Same can go wrong as well. Have you seen some of those viral ones
yeah,
that,
yeah,
oh
yeah, yeah.
gosh, yeah.
It gets kind of weird in some of the
I
denominations
love how
for
now you
sure.
say magic spell and then they
Oh yeah, I mean that's what it is. At the time, it felt difference. He was infusing the water with the Holy Spirit and the blessing of Jesus.
that's
But
more
no,
like
it's a magic spell. Yeah, it's like make this water special. But uh,
it.
normally as a baby, that's what would happen for the Methodists. But when I was a child, I was actually in the NICU, and I came down with a very serious illness. Was in there for a couple of months, very very bad time and stuff. So we didn't get baptized. And then later, as I grew up, I chose to be baptized. I remember having the
Mm.
conversation with my parents, and it was a really big deal for me, because I knew that eventually I would go through confirmation, which is this process of young adults in the Methodist denomination, and they do it in like Catholicism too. It's slightly different in the others, but it's basically you like reaffirming that you love Jesus and you worship Jesus and that you're going to be a faithful member of the church and yada yada yada.
And do you
Um,
have to do that after a particular age? As in, like, you're doing this with as an informed thing now? Is that what
Yeah,
the okay.
it's right around, funny enough, it's right around that general age of consent that seems to be across a lot of the religions, right around that, like, first starting into teenage years. So
Yeah.
I think we did it at like 13. So
Okay.
and I went through that. I got baptized and I went through the confirmation. And um again, that whole time, that preacher that we had liked, that we had continually asked, the Methodist Church to let stay with us, he continued to stay there. We voted, a few more times to keep him, and we all really liked him. We thought he was great. And then when it was finally time, and he was like, "Hey, much as I love being here, you guys know Jesus is calling. I gotta move on to the next church."
Yeah.
And the next preacher that we got was one that was formerly a Baptist preacher. And oh my gosh, the backbiting and the freaking rumors and stuff that was going, they would like, oh my God, he used to be a Baptist preacher. He's not doing that anymore, is he? You think he's gonna come in preaching like a Baptist? Oh my gosh. It was, again, it was
So
so silly to me. It was so ridiculous.
you
And
found it ridiculous then as well?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Because I again, where my head was very much in that thought stopping technique of, well, you just believe, you just have the faith, you just trust in it, you just put your whole heart in it, and you don't really have to be concerned. And so where I was a couple of different things. Was, hey, look, if the Baptists are wrong, and this guy was a former Baptist, that's because he has enough faith to listen to God to become
Yeah.
a Methodist, you
Yeah.
know? And it was like, hey, look, if
Oh
you
my God.
here are concerned about this Baptist preacher, it's because you just haven't fully given into God's word, because maybe he's trying to teach us something, you know? And so
Yeah.
just for so long, it's just every single question could be answered with crap like that.
Yeah.
And again, it is, in my opinion, a lot of times, that's the most honest answer for this stuff. And
True.
the problem with that is it's actually a better answer to say, I don't know, and not try and make some conclusion based on it. If you admit that you have no way of knowing something because it's just up to God, it's just up to Allah, well, then what you're saying is you don't know. So then why are you telling me afterwards, well, actually, I do know? Like, I don't know. I'll never know. There's no way I can understand it. But I promise this is what God said. It's like,
Yeah.
what? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah. So exactly. Like even when you're saying it back now and like, I'm hearing it from where I am now, it's almost like a comedy show. Like are
Yeah.
you like I struggle to see how you came up with that response, but that is
Hmm.
such a perfect response in the face of what you're trying to, like deal with.
Hmm.
But so when did like the penny drop for you? When were you like, okay, you know what? This is a lot of what's going on.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
so
That's a
when did
really
that start
That's a
to
really good
unravel?
question. Because there were a lot of times in my life where, I had reached out to God and I had prayed. And again, that was kind of one of the big things about the whole Protestant Reformation a very long time ago, was that you didn't have to go through some authority in the religion. You yourself can speak to God at any time. And it got to a place where I wasn't hearing anything, right?
Right.
And when it finally hit me that, hey, I wasn't actually getting any responses, and what I was doing was whatever outcome that presented itself to me, I would just come up with some answer for it. So I remember receiving a pamphlet when I was younger at church, and it said on the front, it said, something about like, why God answers prayers the way he does, or like how God answers prayers or something. And like the first page was like, why God says yes to some prayers. And then it gave, like 10 bullet points. And then it was like, why God says no to some prayers. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I opened it again and it was like, why God sometimes doesn't respond to prayers. And I'm like, well, you just got an answer for fricking one of every one of these. That
Yeah.
doesn't count. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
It's like if the thing you
Mhm.
asked for happens, then God said yes, and here's the reason. But if it doesn't, then God said no. But if neither of them, then God's saying, hang on a second, none of that makes sense. You're just anything that happens, you're saying, well, there it is. That's proof. It's like whether or not the you know microwave explodes when you put a fork in it or not, doesn't matter, because God. It's like, well, that
Yeah.
doesn't answer any question.
Yeah.
um but truly, when I actually started trying to get some answers to these questions, when I actually started looking into a lot of the scholarship behind where the Bible came from. Honestly, just reading the Bible is really helpful, because whether it's the Bible or the Quran, there's like one or two verses that seem not so bad. And you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. I've heard that before. And then the very next one is just like atrocious. And you're like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, why didn't they tell me about this one?
Yeah.
Um, and so,
But were
yeah.
you reading this out of like trying to better learn your faith, or were you
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, so it was
Yeah.
actually out of your belief in devotion and you were just
Mhm.
taking okay.
I wasn't trying to prove it to anyone. I wanted to assure myself that what I was believing was correct.
Mm,
And in the process of looking further into it and trying to ask myself, well, is this something that I accept? Again, I was on the debate team in high school, and so when somebody would bring up an argument, and then the response would be, well, we don't really have anything to show that. That was a huge point that I would always try to win on. I'd be like, well, judge, they don't know what they're talking about. They said,
yeah.
look at this bad thing, but they don't have anything to demonstrate this. How do they know this is going to happen? And so once I just started accepting that that actually applies everywhere in life. There's no dividing line. If you accept things without good reason, well, then you're always more likely to accept things without good reason, and that leads to worse outcomes. And so once I just wanted to be consistent about stuff, that meant that I no longer had the fun of believing that I was born a broken sinner and had to give my whole life to some imaginary being. I also stopped believing in things like aliens visiting Earth and probing us in cornfields. I don't believe in souls, healing crystals. Yeah, none of it anymore.
Chucked it all
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
Everything, yeah, that doesn't have the evidence. No, I
yep,
hear that. But
yep.
I also wanted to ask you, what was I going to say? Hey, the voting thing, real quick, is do you just like, is that a normal thing? Like you vote to keep the pastor
Oh,
in
for the
that cell?
Methodists.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
for the
okay.
Methodists. And that's one of the things about going through confirmation is that now once you've done that, you can become a voting member of that church. And so, like, for instance, there was a period of time where the church that we were at, the actual building, was getting too small for the amount of people. And so there was this whole massive discussion. I mean, it took like 3 or 4 days. We all gathered at the church on like a Tuesday at like 6 p.m. and we stayed until
Yeah.
like 8 or 9. Everybody got to say whatever they wanted. And then we voted on whether or not we were going to buy this lot that was near our church and start building a bigger church. And, some people were for it. Some people were against it. Some people said, oh, I want to build another church because I hate the way this sanctuary looks. Crazy stuff to me because, again, at the end of it, and I remember saying this to my mom one day as we were leaving, I was like, Mom, why is everybody so concerned about this? Isn't God going to take care of it? Like, isn't God going to do the thing that wants from us? Does God want us to buy another lot and start building a bigger church? Because then it'll happen, right? Like, why do we have to vote on it?
Theoretically, it should.
But
Yeah, right.
but yeah, that's definitely something that they do. And again, yeah, by the time that first pastor who had stayed for a while left, and we got this new guy, I think I probably went through another 3 or 4 main pastors and associate pastors before I ended up, not going back to the church and stuff. I went for a few years as a non-believer just to play music.
Oh,
Which,
wow. Okay, we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
wait, hold that thought, hold that thought. Tanky is saying, to be honest, that community sounds kind of nice.
I mean,
Should
so that's the thing. Yeah, like they're not, again, they're not like in general bad people, especially
yeah.
a lot of the people that were at my church. I mean, and it's kind of like, if you ever do get to meet a Mormon family in the United States, the vast majority of them are really genuinely sweet people. They just also believe some really atrocious things. And so it's like that's such a weird kind of juxtaposition there. I've got a buddy in my city who longtime Christian, very firm in his faith, actually translates some Christian apologetics to other languages. Really, really sweet guy. Also, in my opinion, is very wrong about some of the things that he believes, and he thinks the same about me. But
Well, that's what Tanky's saying. I might end up brainwashed, to be honest. Imagine, imagine I actually got converted by an atheist stream.
look, I'm not trying to
Hilarious.
push you further, Tanky, but I just will say this: the potluck dinners for the Methodists, pretty good. Okay, there are some really decent cooks in the Methodist religion. So I
Tanky,
don't
we
know.
got to
Think
study
about it.
on because I might join you. Potluck dinners sound good. And Elliot, one thing you said I really wanted to bring up real quick is, you said that God stopped talking to you.
Mm,
So I feel like, what did the phone line just go dead all of a sudden? What was it like when you were getting responses before?
mm.
Because Infidel here made a really good point. I think you did it. He says, imagine being told that not hearing voices is a problem.
Yeah, yeah, for
Religion.
sure, for
That's kind
sure.
of, yeah. But do you just want to? So, what was it like for you initially? Were you hearing God talk to you, or were you thinking that subconsciously I've received an
Mhm.
answer?
Yeah, it was the thing that we all do, that is just something really, really mundane and common for us people, and it's hard to recognize that it's the same situation a lot of times, because you have, in a religious setting, you know, when you're in that headspace and there are other people around you telling this and confirming this and, you know, building you up and whatnot, you take this answer, this religious answer, that it is something coming from outside of you. But whenever any of us is, you know, we've got like an extra hour and a half before, you know, we got to be somewhere, or we're sitting in a waiting room or something, and we just kind of daze off. And it's almost like you have this conversation in your head, but you're not actually having a conversation. Like, it's
Right.
you responding to yourself. And, you know, once you recognize that that is the same thing, then it's like, oh, okay, I was never actually hearing anything. But yeah, that there was a period of time where I felt much more like that. I felt much more like, okay, cool. This answer that I'm feeling inside me, you know, this nice warm feeling, you know, that's God speaking to me. It was weird how God very rarely, you know, came over the loudspeaker and just told me something completely different than what I was thinking. Right? That it was very rare that I was like, God, you know, I just want to win this one soccer match, or whatever it was. You know, I just want to pass this math test.
Yeah.
And it's very rare that God came over and was like, no, you actually suck at math and you should stop it. But yeah, eventually it got to a place where I would pour my heart out. I would try my best to receive an answer, and it was just nothing. Because again, we all have those moments too, where somebody just looks over at you and you're kind of staring off into the distance and they're like, hey, what are you thinking about? You're like, oh, literally nothing. I don't know. My mind just kind of went blank for a minute.
Yeah.
And again, that's just something about being a person, you know, that's just something about what it means to have this squishy substance in our heads. And once I got to that place where I was understanding that, yeah, it was just me talking back to myself, then it was like, oh, okay, now I'm not hearing anything.
Wow. That's,
Yeah.
you know what, Elliot, so there's this concept in Islam, which is called, like, it's a type of prayer, but it's a special prayer that you do when you're actively seeking an answer from God, or like what to do. So it's called istikhara, and you pray it, and then you're meant to just sit there, like obviously on the prayer mat, it like doing dua, so like praying, obviously, as you do, but you just basically essentially sit there until you get the answer inside of you. And I remember doing this prayer as a Muslim for like a really important life decision. And even then, like as a believer, I was like, am I just meant to wait now? Or like, well, how does this work? And then you talk yourself into like, oh, I sense an answer's coming. Oh, okay, there is definitely something happening there. Oh yeah, I've got the answer. And lo and behold, the answer is what I genuinely wanted to do anyway. But like, it's wild when you're in that like mind frame that you're actually expecting to hear something, but it's your unconscious like talking back to you. Anyway,
Yeah.
crazy.
And that kind of thought pattern was ultimately the thing for me that was the hardest to step away from. So there are a lot of you know, ex-Christians of all stripes that struggle with, you know, the thought of hell, or struggle with the thought of like, you can't be a good person without a God belief, you know, that type of stuff. For me, one of the biggest things that I really had to work on getting away from was this idea that like all of these things in the world were like God trying to send a message to me, you know. And that was that's one of the problems with, you know, being in that space where somebody's like, hey, earnestly ask God, and then just sit here until you get an answer. Because what happens is, you know, a bird flies into the window and you're like, oh, Jesus, oh, he's speaking to me, oh my goodness. And in reality, that bird just couldn't see and just hit a freaking window, you
Yeah,
know. But
having a bad day.
right, exactly, you know, but that's what happens. You get in that mindset, and then every single thing that goes on, somebody cuts you off in traffic and you're like, God's trying to teach me patience, you know. Thank goodness, you know. But
And
yeah,
it's the
again,
number plate that cuts you off. That's
uh-huh.
also symbolic for
Of
something.
course, of course, of course. It's like, oh, it had a 7 in it. Like, oh no.
Exactly.
Oh, if you it's a 3 and a 4, but if you add 3 and 4 together, it gives you 7. Yeah, yeah, all kinds
Oh
of
my
stuff like that.
gosh. No, it really is wild. Oh my gosh. Okay, Elliot, so then you've come to this point, right? You're like
Mm.
seeing through it, you read the Bible. Next, you did mention that you went to the church even as a non-believer, but
Mhm.
just to kind of carry on with the music. So how did it work? Did you have to, were you able to be open with your lack of belief now, or did
Mm.
you kind of just go with the flow? And what was the reaction like, if any, from
I
everyone, loved
I
ones?
didn't really bring it up to anybody.
Okay.
I was able to just kind of walk in and sit down at a drum set or stand behind some bells and play for a little bit. And I just kind of let a lot of the things that people would say roll off my back, because I wasn't in a place where I really was firm in that non-belief. I was in a
Okay.
spot more so where it was like, I just no longer accept this stuff, and I
Yeah.
haven't really continued to look much further. I would eventually start looking into, and this was a huge, huge help for me, various moral philosophies and stuff. So
Mhm.
looking into, utilitarianism, consequentialism type stuff, deontology, virtue ethics, just all of this, because one of the questions that was really burning for me was whether or not you could be a good person without some belief in God, right? It seemed really easy to me. God says be a good person. Great, cool, done. Just figure out what God means by be a good person, which, surprisingly is more difficult than it sounds. But
Yeah.
um, be a good person because God said be a good person. Great, easy. But are there
Mhm.
other answers? And once I started looking more into that, it was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that makes me feel better about it. But also still, like, I don't know what I would say if somebody said, like, hey, um, we dug up Sodom and Gomorrah, or we found the walls of Jericho or something.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be until years later that I started looking into more of that stuff. But it's been very helpful. I think
So you
that
deep
time.
dive, sorry, did you dive into the archaeological side of things that like obviously wasn't how it coincides with the biblical stories? Were you actively like looking to see if, the Ark of the Covenant this and like
Mm.
remains of the Noah's Ark and that kind of
So
jazz? Oh, okay.
eventually,
Okay.
and within the past probably 4 or 5 years, I started stumbling on some wonderful places. Like I saw Derek was hanging out earlier. Myth Vision
Uh-huh.
became such an incredible resource for me, as well as the Digital
Amazing.
Hammurabi channel,
Yes.
because Megan and Josh Bowen are just geniuses. They're incredible, and that type of stuff really ended up helping and strengthening a lot of my understandings. I also did the rounds of, I think the vast majority of the ex-Christian, atheist YouTuber people. We've all seen the classic debates, Hitchens and William
Oh yeah.
Lane Craig or Sam Harris, Dawkins, all the classic ones,
Four
right? And so I
Horsemen, all
spent
of that. Yeah.
exactly exactly spent a long time watching those and listening to the various arguments. And I think that's one thing that is really helpful too for a lot of people when they're coming out of it. They've just never had somebody else lay it out succinctly for them. And so it is really nice hearing somebody else say, yeah, but here's the reason why the soul doesn't exist, right? And you're like, oh, yeah, I kind of felt that, but I never really knew those words. And
Yes.
that's very helpful for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, eventually it would get to a place where nobody else in my family was really going. My mother was still a believer at the time, but it just wasn't
Mhm.
something we really talked about too much. And one day, just at the dinner table at the age of like 18 or 19, I was like, yeah, like I don't believe in God anymore. I don't really go to church or accept any of that stuff. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. Most of the unpleasantries have come from just random people in Tennessee, because
Okay.
Tennessee, being in the south of the U.S., we're very, very Bible focused. So there is literally not a single there's probably like 10 different ways I can get to my house. Totally different roads, don't have to use the same ones at all. Okay.
Yeah.
Every single one of them within 2 to 3 minutes of driving, I will pass at least 2 churches.
Okay,
So
wow.
it literally does not matter where I go. There are an intense amount of churches. I don't know if you're familiar with that guy Greg Locke, who yells and
No.
screams about he yells and screams about witches in his church, and he does a big burning every like Halloween where he like, tells people to bring their healing crystals and their tarot cards and their Ouija boards and burn them, which is kind of weird because it's like, are these people admitting that they already had all these things, or are they going out and buying them purposefully to do this?
True.
Also, crystals don't burn in a bonfire. That's just not how that works. Like
Oh,
that's just,
yeah, I
but
assume that was a separate healing to the burning, but
I
wow. Oh God, I don't know what's going on
he's
here.
he loves to get up and yell and scream. But his church actually is very close to where I grew up, so it's not very
Oh,
far at all. So, but yeah, lots of religious fervor in this state, in this area. Normally, as long as I don't say much about it, it doesn't come up for people or anything. But
mhm.
for instance, about a year ago, when I was at my job, which at the time I was working at a retail store, person walks in, starts kind of just monologuing to me, and I'm like, okay, yeah. And then like a few minutes later, they start mentioning about like this Masonic conspiracy to like take over certain parts of like my city or something. And I was like, oh, okay, this is getting weirder. And then this person proceeds to tell me how they know that I'm on the side of righteousness because they can feel the Holy Spirit inside me. They can tell that I've accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. So, I let them tire themselves out. And then when they asked for a donation, I just told them, I don't really have any cash. Thanks so much. Really appreciate what
You
you do.
let them expend all that energy before you tell them.
God should have told him. God should have talked to him. I mean, come on.
Fair play, Elliot, fair play. Burn.
Oh,
Oh
no. I
my
mean,
gosh.
I've had sitting at a bar one night, just hanging out with some buddies, and I have had random people start a conversation with me where, I don't say anything more, offensive or intrusive than they do. They say something about, God this or God that, and I just say, oh, I don't believe. Um, I have had random people lay hands on me in a bar and pray for my soul and my salvation, and that I would turn away from my wickedness. I haven't yet,
Wow.
so I don't know if that's like an indictment of their prayers or their God, but you
A
know,
bit of both, I'd
yeah,
say, but
yeah,
also
probably.
in a bar thing as well, like, let the guy be.
Yeah, come on, guys. Like, I got this much left of my beer. Like, chill out.
And yeah, surely like the best place for you preaching either. But anyway, Dee is saying the same thing that it's the same in Rhode Island. There are at least 5 churches within a 5-minute walk from home.
Yeah, yeah. And
Wow.
there really is a huge there's a very fascinating history with religion when it comes to the United States, for sure. I mean, Rhode Island has a whole big history, as does, like Connecticut and Vermont and stuff. There are a lot of different people that got kicked out of one place because they were, saying certain things about God and Jesus that the people in the area didn't like, so they pushed them somewhere else. We've also had in the United States a good handful of times where there was just this massive religious fervor that just kind of took over. And it was just like for decades, there was just bunches of people gathering outdoors and just praising Jesus and speaking in tongues and rolling on the grounds and stuff. Yeah, it's very interesting if you like history and specifically religious focused, but it very much shaped a lot of the culture. I know a bunch of people who have even said to me, like, they're like, ah, man, I don't really go to church, I don't really believe too much, but like, I believe enough and I'm culturally Christian. I'm like, well, what the hell is
Okay.
the culture of Christianity? What is
Yeah.
the culture flavor of it. There's nothing that's like so specific to this that isn't just like, how do you drive a car as a cultural Christian? What do you do differently, you know? But again, it's just so ingrained that it really is one of the first things that a lot of people will ask, you know, hey, where do you go to church? Like, oh, do you go to church around here? Like, oh man, I preach over at this place. Where do you go? So
Yeah, because even I was just thinking about that. Like, I never really hear cultural Christian, whereas I hear cultural Muslim quite a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
Right. And I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense if you want to hold on to like the celebrations, Eid, for
sure,
example. But like, even with as a cultural Christian with something like Christmas, even that goes back to like a pagan winter solstice
yeah,
festival, right? So it's that even if you, I mean, they're not going to think that obviously because, you know, that own history is in that part, even the whole pagan roots of Easter and all of that. But
right,
technically, if you were to be intellectually honest, then it's pretty hard to be a cultural Christian, I guess. But then I
yeah,
guess, yeah, the Judeo-Christian values that I guess the world yeah, I was gonna say
yeah,
you can go
yeah.
down that wormhole, but
Yeah, I do enjoy hearing that a lot, because one of my favorite things to do since, um, really trying to branch out and learn about the other religions and the struggles that a lot of atheists in those spaces have to deal with. Um, I love to point out the similarities between Islam and Christianity whenever I can. It's very, very fun for me just because I get this real hardcore, like evangelical Baptist or something. And, there's generally a little bit of xenophobia that goes in there. And it's like, you're just a little bit darker than I want you to be skin wise. So I don't like you. And I'm like, oh, I get it, man. It's terrible. Like they believe this. And they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. I'm like, yeah. What book of the Bible was that in again? It was it in Mark? Was it in Luke? Where
oh,
is that again? I love it's love,
oh
love,
my
love doing that.
God.
So much fun. Yeah, yeah,
Fully like corner them.
yeah, yeah.
They have no
It's
idea what's coming.
when you look at all three of those Abrahamic faiths, it's
Yeah,
just like they all have a core to them that is just crap. And it's
yeah,
like it doesn't matter where you're preaching this. It doesn't matter, who it is that's saying it. It's still garbage. And it just takes that just enough. I mean, it's the outsider's view of faith, right? You just
yeah.
have to get somebody to look at it just enough from a perspective of, hey, what if somebody else came up to you and told you this? Like, what if somebody else came up to you and told you that this was the right thing? What would you say to that? It's like, well, that's not exactly what's happening. It's like, really? You're not saying a magic spell over bread like once a week to like eat a zombie? You're not doing that? Just tell me what you're doing then. I just explain it to me again. It's like, well, no, so we say a prayer and then the flesh it like it transforms, but not like really. And it's like, okay, so you are eating a dead body or you're not eating a dead body. It's just you tell me. But
Oh my God, this is hilarious. Let's show now when you put Christianity like this, because there's always people who come at me and they're like, well, Islam, like, Christianity is still miles better than Islam.
mm-mm.
And I'm like, okay, like superficially, maybe sure. But if I deep dive into some of these things that you're saying, like
Mhm.
everything from this stuff, from speaking in tongues, from like some of the various beliefs,
Yeah.
it gets as whack. It really
Mhm.
does.
It does very, very quickly. And there are many, many people that, love to try to, you know, push it all down and just show you the good stuff. But truly, when you really think about it, the best stuff out of Christianity at the end of the day really is abhorrent because
Yeah.
what it's telling you is no matter what, no matter what, you are the problem. Everything bad that happens to you in your life, all the pain and suffering that you'll feel here and afterwards, really is because at the end of the day, you just aren't good enough. You
Yeah.
are fundamentally broken. You are fundamentally going to sin. You are going to be unable to adhere to what God wants. And because of that, you have to sacrifice everything about yourself to give up for this guy who was tortured and killed many, many years ago. It's like
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Yeah, and I think Christopher Hitchens puts it when he goes, born sick and commanded to be well.
Yeah.
That's the whole principle of this. And either way you look at it, is like that is a very like abusive situation to be in.
Right.
But then beyond that, this well, especially in Islam more so, but in Christianity, it's like that savior complex that somebody had to like
Mhm.
die, sacrifice themselves so that you could live this life. But in Islam, it's like very, I guess in Christianity too, but it's very slave master
Mhm.
relationship, which again Hitchens puts beautifully. It's like, why do you feel like you need to be like subservient or a slave
Mm.
to something? It's like a lot of people that fear losing religion. It's like, oh, if there's not a sky daddy out there, then who do I be a slave to?
Mhm.
You know, and like the way he describes heaven as like eternal North Korea as well. Like, why would you want a situation like that? But yeah, I was
Yeah.
good as well. So when you were a believer, how stringently did you believe in hell and heaven? Did you believe in eternal punishment and heaven, or wow, like
Yeah. So I definitely believed in heaven. There was definitely, this beautiful, perfect place, where I could get to, be with God and be forever peaceful and stuff. I had a hell belief, but I think because of the fact that I was in this place where I did just stop thinking about so much when it came to the concept of, yeah, but what about all this terrible stuff that's going on, right?
mhm,
My thoughts were just in the boat of, well, God must understand, right? And so if I do wake up one day in hell, then God must have a good purpose for that, right? And same with everybody else. Now, I was never in the boat of saying like somebody is or is not going to hell. That wasn't my place. That's God's place, right? God decides that. I could have picked people out at the very least and said, hey, from what I understand, they're probably going to go to hell. But
yeah,
again, I don't know for sure. But yeah, that idea, that fear, that psychological torture of telling somebody that you will be, physically harmed forever and ever and ever, and it'll be the most excruciating thing ever. That was never something that gave me a huge amount of struggle, because
okay,
once I got to a place where I really was in this boat of believing, like, God is so beautiful and loving and caring, and that's really what the message is. Definitely by the time I was leaving, I was one of those believers that was like, oh, it's just about love, like it's all about love. And it's like, oh, cool, so the genocide of the whole world with water was loving. And it's like, but see, God loves, that's why. So when it was like, well, why does God punish people, if
and
God really
torture
loves
and
everybody?
yes,
Yeah, why all this crap? It didn't matter, because again, it was, well, there's no way that you and I can possibly understand. We're not on that level. And the best thing to do is try to, move forward and just continue with your faith. This should strengthen your faith. If you have questions, you should be more faithful at the end of those questions.
mhm,
Screw the answer. Just believe harder. Again, that doesn't really actually do anything. You're not actually, like, when in the United States, when we have another mass shooting, which, my watch is a little broken, but I'm imagining it'll be soon. It was just terrible, right? But
mhm.
when people say thoughts and prayers, what they're saying is, hey, great, this is an opportunity for me to do nothing. That's
Yeah,
what they're doing. And they recognize that, honestly, which is why they still say it, because you have the option to help somebody. I can't tell you how many times at church there would be somebody standing with, other members of the congregation, and they'd say like, oh, really, really, really struggling ever since, my husband died, or really, really having a hard time, with bills this month, or just got a flat tire or got in an accident, my shoulder hurts, and everybody would stand around them and go like, oh yeah, we'll pray for you. And it's like, do you have $5 in your wallet? Like, they're saying they need help with bills and this is a friend of
Seriously.
yours. Like, do you have $5? Like, give him $5, you know? Like, you're married to a massage therapist. Like, see if your wife will massage this person's
Yeah.
shoulder. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
We're gonna pray for you because we don't actually want to do anything. So it's a lot easier for us to do this prayer thing, because then we don't have to put much effort into it, and we can still feel good about doing something. So,
And this is one of the most, like, I find, deplorable things, because this actually takes away from, it really allows people to just, like, sit back, and it really allows you to not actively make a change.
right.
For example, like, even that we see this in Islamic communities. First of all, like, there is one, I'm not sure if it's like a little bit of a misconstruence of a verse, but there is some verse somewhere in the Quran that kind of hints at, like, God will help those who also help themselves, which I think is really good, because at least whenever a Muslim's like, oh, thoughts and prayers, and I'll pray for you, it's also like, oh, but Allah also told you to go seek some knowledge and go help yourself. That's a little bit of a push in the right direction. But sometimes you're like, this is an actual insult to, like, medicine, science, doctors, my intelligence. Like, for example, if somebody's like really ill, with like a life-altering condition, to think that you can get pieces of the Quran and like dip it in water around their head, and they're going to somehow be cured from something as big as cancer or something.
Yeah.
Like, that's when it gets like absolutely ridiculous. They think holding a bead, like chanting nonstop on this bead thing, we call it a tasbih, and having the Quran like dipped in something, put in water overnight, read over you, blown on you, these magic incantations are gonna somehow miraculously cause your cancer to go into remission or something.
Yep.
Like, that's just, it's
And
abysmal.
and there are so many stories like that in the Christian circles, and they oftentimes will highlight all the really, really great stuff and really, really, shun the not so great stuff. The fact that Mother Teresa is currently in the process of being made a saint by the Catholic Church, which
Oh,
means
really?
means a couple of particular things that are really frustrating to me. One of which is that there's a group of people who go out and verify miracles. So there was somebody who claimed that they held a picture of Mother Teresa to their chest, and then something, I don't know, cancer remission or whatever the hell it was. But this group of people went out and confirmed that happened. And now she's in the process of, this was a woman who actively let tens of thousands of people suffer
Thank
while
you.
she was perfectly fine. She forced them into immense torture just because she fully believed that the magic guy in the sky cared more about them in pain than being happy. So
And she thought that about poor people, like they deserved it. They had to experience this in
yeah.
order to attain salvation. Like, it gets very dark. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you for sharing that, Elliot. That needed to be said. Actually, I hadn't
Yeah.
even brought that up since it all went down. But we have a question for you, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. NA Zone 75, I think it is. Thank you so much for your super chat. The question is, how do Methodists feel about Islam and Muslims? How does race play in the faith, teaching, and culture?
Yeah. From my experience, it wasn't a huge thing. So when 9/11 happened, which was one of the first times I think the vast majority of people in the United States realized that other countries do exist and other people exist with other cultures and religions. That was when Muslim was on, everybody's lips. My congregation really didn't have any discussion on, like, oh no, this is just something about all Muslims, they're just terrible or anything. When it came to understanding the Islamic faith sat in the exact same boat as Catholicism and the Baptists, right? It's like, hey, they're doing great. They got a lot of stuff right. Not terrible. Some of it was wrong, really wrong. They should be Methodist. But anything like trying to go further into that, no. I never had anybody say in any Sunday school or Sunday service or anything during confirmation, none of this where somebody was like, hey, here are like all the bad things or all the wrong things that the Muslims believe. we didn't really care too much about other faiths because of the fact that it was like, no, we've got it. We just keep believing, and we just believe harder. And, you know, once you believe hard enough, the rest of it doesn't matter because you got it right. You know, you got it right because you can feel that you got it right, because the belief inside you just kind of goes in this weird circular pattern that doesn't work for anything else except this. But yeah, race, you know, race or nationality and so forth was never huge for me. A lot of the discussions were that kind of generic. Yeah, they're you know, they're on the right track, but oh, kiddo, you got this one thing wrong, you know. So
Wow. Okay. Wow. So you considered them to be somewhat on the right track then, in terms of like, wow. Okay. It just
yeah.
in the sense that they were monotheistic and yeah.
We were worshiping it wouldn't be for years and years and years till I came to the stance that I do believe that the character of the almighty big powerful God in the Islamic teachings, as well as various Christian denominations, as well as you know, Jewish denominations and so forth, they are all different characters.
Okay.
That's where I sit now. But for a very, very long time in my life, I was like, no, they're all basically just the same thing. We just kind of misinterpreted them a little. I think when you really do try to ascribe attributes to each one of them, you find that there is enough of a difference that I do think it's worth looking at it from the perspective of like, yeah, these are different understandings. I think Allah is quite a dick. The Jewish God is also a dick, but in a different way about it, which like he cares about other things more so. The Christian God is a dick who tries to pretend like he's not. And I think it's nice just kind of parsing that out, you know?
It's
But yeah.
true. It's like he chilled out for a little bit in
Uh-huh.
between and then kind of
Yeah.
went back to his old ways, but slightly
Right.
morphed.
He became like the dad, like when the kid becomes a teenager and the dad's like, "Hey, I'm hip. Like I wear cool t-shirts now. Like what's that band you listen to? They're great. I love that song." And it's like, "Yeah, cool, dad. Also, like, you know, we know it's not true. Like we know you're
Yeah.
just lying."
Yeah, exactly. And like weird different obsessions, like the obsession with shellfish and stuff back in the Torah, and then in the Quran you've got these other weird obsessions, and somehow like they don't really line up. But then
Yeah.
Muhammad's like clinging at straws to do some things that the Jews do, and the others he's like, hey, they're so wrong in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, it's a whole can of worms. We have another super chat from Stop Scamming Man. Thank you so much, Stop Scamming Man, for your support as always. Stop Scamming Man is saying the New Testament word Gehenna was translated as hell, but was actually a garbage dump in Jerusalem where it was prophesied the sinners would one day burn at. There are hadiths calling hell Gehenna. Yeah, I definitely heard that Gehenna was, in fact, like this burning pit that was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely rancid, and they would like throw rubbish, and it was just like a horrible, yeah, like you said, a massive pit in a
Right.
that Gehenna was actually a place where this pit was, and then eventually, apparently, they started throwing bodies in there as well, and then the stench got worse and worse. But for me, so far in the hadiths, the translations anyway that I've read, I do see the name Jahannam, which is the Arabic of Gehenna, in most places. But I will do a search for Gehenna with this spelling on sunnah.com. I think that would be interesting. So thank you. Did you want to comment on that at all, Elliot?
Yeah, just to say that for sure one thing that you find very much throughout a lot of the older Jewish writings, as well as a lot of the early Islamic writings, is a particular focus on cleanliness. And this actually is something that travels throughout a lot of different cultures. The Romani culture, who are known for, you know, traveling all over various places in Europe and have been doing this for centuries, have a really, really strict code about going to the bathroom. Okay.
Oh,
So
really?
like you're not even allowed to like make it known that you're going to go to, like, you can't step away from the group and be like, "Hey, I gotta just real quick in the bushes," you know. You have to like sneak off so that nobody even knows that you're doing it, because that's how much cleanliness is important. And you see this throughout both of those texts, and even in a good handful of the early Christian texts, you see this focus on it. It's just that they kind of flip it. Like Jesus makes this particular moment to say, like, it's not what goes in your mouth that keeps you clean or dirty. It's what comes out of your mouth. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like both matter. But that was him kind of pushing back on those old, understandings of eat shellfish, don't eat pork, that type of stuff, right? But yeah, this was one of the reasons why this place was considered so bad. Is very dirty. Like it's so dirty. It is just full of garbage. We're just burning it all. It smells like crap. And that really, really matters to a culture that really had to pay attention to, especially nomadic cultures like that, really have to pay attention to cleanliness, because otherwise a bunch of people start dying. Now, they didn't know about like germs and communicable diseases back then. But
That God
hey,
wouldn't think to put that in their books,
for some weird reason, I don't know why he missed that one. Seemed like that would have been helpful. But
yeah, no, in the Quran he has time to tell us to curse Abu Lahab like 5 times a day, but he can't tell us about germ theory.
and to remind us that the book is super duper clear. Like every so often, Allah's just like, by the way, this is a really good book, you guys. Like, I don't know if you know this, but this book right here is awesome. Okay.
Exactly. But maybe this is I don't know if this is Valley of Hinnom, if that's where Gehenna is now, but Stop Scamming Man is saying it's a nice part of Jerusalem nowadays. That's so interesting if that's the case. And yeah, sorry, people were just I didn't know that fun fact about the Romani culture either. I was
Oh,
like,
yeah. Yeah. It's very, very interesting. And again, like one of the things, this is what, as I've continued to look into these spaces and stuff, you start to see all of these like pretty blatant similarities and comparisons between all this stuff. And it's like, it kind of makes a lot more sense that somebody just grabbed this little piece and kind of went with it a little bit too far. Rather than like it was some brand new revelation or something. I mean, it's weird that Muhammad gets these revelations, right? Coming directly from God through this super duper awesome angel guy. And apparently all Allah wants to do is just remind him of the same stuff that had already been written down. Like, what a weird waste of time. Allah could have just been like, hey, Muhammad, so you know those books that the Jews read, just like throw away the first one and like the middle third of the second one, and you're good. And then now here's some more important stuff. No, he had to take the entire time to like describe all of this again. And it's like, why would he do that? That doesn't make sense.
And like cast them to hell for like half of it,
Yeah.
like even if they are slightly on the right track, you're still gonna say like, yeah,
worst of all creatures.
Yeah, they are literally like the scum, the worst of creatures. They're seriously deluded. Like
it's a really loving book. It's really loving.
Really loving. And it speaks to your power, God. Like it's telling that you couldn't even keep 1 or 2 books in order.
Yeah.
I mean,
so I'll just try it again. I tried it these last few times. It apparently went super bad, but I'll just give it another go, I guess. I mean,
well, Elliot, I'm not sure if you know, but like we have Muhammad reincarnated and he joins my streams. He's here right now. He's called Muhammad Leader, and he always apologizing. So he's saying now Allah is my personal pimp, but he's been apologizing to all the nations that have had Islam imposed on them. Where are you? I'm sorry. He's saying, I'm sorry to all modern day Arabs for making them associated with Islam. You're so repentant. I love it, Muhammad. So much work to do.
Thank you. Yeah, really. We appreciate it. It's a selfish narcissist. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I will blame.
See, thank you.
I'll say give me a second here, because the Friendly Ex-Muslim, when the 2 Abdullahs did the Epileptic Prophet series, oh my gosh, I just adored the crap out of that. That was so interesting. And it's like there are so many old sources that they are pulling from that it's like, obviously we can't diagnose this. We're not clinicians. It's ancient history, all that good stuff. But oh my gosh, yeah. But holy crap! I mean, by the end of it, I'm just sitting there going like, they really made a good case. Like, I mean,
It
he
is.
probably was.
It is. In light of the evidence, I'm sorry, even in light of like the sources that are within like
Mhm.
Islam's mainstream narrative, like
Yeah.
even the hadith where as he's getting revelation, he's like heavily snorting like a camel,
Mhm.
he
Mhm.
shivers, he is going through what we'd consider like a fit, running back to Khadija, like shivering. These aren't like some nice little, like even when you ask Muslims, like, why did he have to go through so much suffering to get a revelation? They even turn that on something like so beautiful that you can't, like,
Mhm.
it's so tough to handle. Direct revelation from
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I
Like,
mean? It's like when
what?
Moses saw God in the burning bush, like he could barely take it. Like people are like, why didn't God show himself to me? I would have handled it better.
Yeah. It's so much of it is like so weird on so many levels, and it's like this is not a good, like, why was Muhammad essentially being tortured every time he got a revelation? And the
Yeah.
answer is, well, God's just really great. And it's like, I don't feel like that solves it. It's just like Moses in the Bible. He's going to meet God. You know, he's standing there at the bush, and at some point in the conversation, apparently, which I mean, I guess you can just do that. You can just chat casually with God. But at some point, God's like, "Oh no, you can't look at me directly, so I'll show you my butt instead." Which is like, why? What is that? Why can I not look at your face, but I can look at your ass? What is that? How does this work, man? Like,
Elliot, you're killing me. Oh my
it's I'm
gosh.
telling you, the more you look into a lot of this stuff, the sillier a lot of it gets.
I just
Um,
think Moses might have found some like actual good weed out there or something he was burning up.
seriously,
It's more
seriously,
plausible.
it makes so much more sense if you think about it from like that perspective, like a bunch of like modern day like stoner dudes or whatever. It's like sitting around and just being like, yo, man, what do you think if like God had a son, man? And then like he like saved us or whatever. Be like, oh dude, that's awesome. Yeah, I like that. Like it, because otherwise it's, you know, it's very strange. It's
Exactly,
all very
especially if
odd.
there's like randomly growing like cannabis sativa or whatever, and it suddenly sets on fire, and they're just a
Mhm,
bunch of men sitting around, but suddenly they're getting like passively high, being like,
mhm,
Moses
mhm.
apparently sees God in a burning bush.
Yeah.
But interesting choice of words, and yeah, Occam's razor. It's easier to think of it this
That's true.
way. Oh my gosh, we've got another super chat from Stop Scamming Man. Thank you so much again for your support, Stop Scamming Man. In Ibn Ishaq's 8th century biography of Muhammad, he speaks of him going on and on about how he's mentioned in, oh my God, in Jewish scripture without the slightest suggestion it's now corrupted.
Yeah. Guess he
Oh,
just forgot at that moment. Like super important everywhere else, but just that one instance, he was like, I don't know. But
he just, I don't think he could, like, if we go into the argument of whether he existed or whatever, but he couldn't
Mhm,
keep up with his own lies, I think, because
mhm,
there's even a point in the hadith where he's actually swearing on the Torah. He's taking an oath
mhm.
on the Torah and saying, I will swear on this because what they believe, I believe. And yet their scriptures are corrupted. And also,
Yep.
Islam falls apart either way, because if their scriptures are corrupted, it means that clearly God does not have the power to preserve scripture. But
Mhm.
if they're not corrupted, that means that Zect and Islam is wrong because they contradict each other enough in the fundamental theology. So
Yep.
either way, Islam is pretty doomed with this claim.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But yeah.
I will say I think one of my favorite stories is the one where like a bunch of people like come up to Muhammad, and then he's like, yeah, like I'll fly up to the seven heavens or whatever, and then like hops on like the donkey with like a woman's face or wings on its feet or whatever the heck it was, right? Whatever
They have to
nonsense.
punch
But
it in the face for it to start moving, Elliot.
it's I mean, hey, it sounds like I'd probably try it. I'm not saying like I'm good at like riding donkeys or horses or anything, but strap a
Oh.
saddle on that thing, I'd take it for a spin. But he goes up to like the lower heavens and comes back in like a day or something. And then like the next time these people come up to him and they're like, "Hey, can you answer this really difficult question?" He's like, "Yeah, totally. I'll be back tomorrow." And then like just disappears for 2 weeks or something. And then they're like, "Hey man, where'd you go? Like, what happened?" And he's like, I forgot to say inshallah. Like, if only I would have. That was the problem. God didn't will it. I forgot to And I love that story because it just
They-
seems so obvious to me that it's bullshit. Like it's just like
yeah.
I don't
And
know.
Elliot, even that story when he like people were asking the next day because he's obviously flown to the seventh heaven and seen glimpses of hell and stuff, yeah, and also negotiated the prayers with God like from
That's
50
right.
to like 5
Yeah, yeah.
because Moses advises him like, I know these people, they're not
What a
going to be able to do
ridiculous story. He's going up and down between the layers of heaven. He goes up, he talks to God. God's like, hey, here's my decree. And then on the way down, there just happens to be this old prophet that's just like hanging out. Like, what is Moses doing there? He's just chilling. Like he just can't do anything but wait for somebody to show up. He's like, hey, Muhammad, it's real quick. Just go ahead and tell you this. Past 5, nobody's gonna do that shit, man. Like, come on, go talk to the big man. You could talk with him. What?
And Moses knows more about what people are going to do than God does. But the funniest part of that story is when Muhammad does like supposedly come back, Aisha is saying to people outright that the guy did not move from his bed last night.
Aisha turns out to be like the best character in Islam because there are so many moments where just like out of nowhere she comes up and she says something and it's like, wow, yeah, that's a really good point. Like, where is it where she says like Allah's command, like they seem to like align with everything that you want or something, like Allah hastens to answer your desires or something. Yeah. It's like so that's so good. It's like just I love that. I love the thought of like all these people standing around, like Muhammad's like getting up out of his bed and he's like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about all this great stuff. And then Aisha's just like standing there in the back, like he didn't go anywhere. He just laid there the whole time, you guys. He didn't do anything. Like that's a great image for me.
And then as you get older, right, you do question this story. Like obviously in when I lived in the Middle East, we actually had the holiday on the night that he supposedly did this.
Oh.
We still get the holiday. It's called Laylatul Miraj. So
nice.
Yeah, and it's considered the night of ascension where he goes up.
Wow.
But like as somebody going to school and like you as in the debate team and doing things like this, I would ask my parents about this and they kind of were like, oh yeah, it was a spiritual journey, like it was an out of body experience.
Oh well, yeah. Well, yeah.
Like what the hell? Yeah. Like okay, it was a spiritual journey. And like Sufis actually really believe that, like in a almost like it was a lucid dream or something, but like he was shown this without even that's mystical. He didn't need to leave his bed, yet God showed him all of this.
Sure. I mean, I to me that sounds less cool. That's just my thoughts on the matter. Like if somebody says to me, I actually rode this living creature up through the clouds into heaven, versus somebody who's like, yeah, I just kind of like thought about it real hard for a while and just kind of like figured this is what it would be. It's like, that's not as impressive to me, like imagine somebody telling you, like, you're like, hey, how have you been? And they're like, oh great, man, I just got back from my trip. It was amazing. Like I went to Australia, I went to Japan, man, Italy this time of year is great. And you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, what did you take a flight? Like did you walk around? And they're like, no, it was just a vision.
Like what? I sat on my sofa and watched documentaries of places I've been there.
Yes, exactly. Like, come on. I mean, come on, man. I mean, okay, fine. Tell me about it. Tell me what you learned about the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But like, don't pretend like you went to Italy.
You have not eaten that risotto under that tower in that setting with that. No, don't say it just happened in your head and you tasted the risotto in your mouth. No. Gosh. But Elliot, see even Muhammad saying now, Muhammad brags about how smart Aisha was, and I completely agree. She was smart enough to see through my scams. She ousted you, like woman to woman, reading her. She really helped me see you for who you really were. So big up Aisha and justice for Aisha to this very day. But yeah, Elliot, I'm mindful of time. I know I've taken an hour and 20 of your time almost.
I'm good. I got as much time as you want, so.
Oh, okay. Also, I was going to ask you, I have like 2 more questions for you. And then if we wanted to take a call, or if someone wants to jump on, that's up to you though.
Absolutely.
Okay, sweet. Like 15 minutes if you want. But yeah, basically, just to round off, how has your life changed since
Mhm.
you've obviously come out of all of this, this
Yeah.
king, and I guess you call yourself Secular Rarity. So yeah,
Yeah.
where's your head at now and how's life?
A lot better for sure, I think, in a lot of different ways. One of the biggest ones, again, for me, one of the hardest beliefs to step away from was that belief that all of these things that were happening in my life, from the biggest to the smallest, all of this was some message crafted for me by God. And so, what I started, once I actually was no longer in that place, I realized how much more comfortable I was with things. And that's not to say that, like, when there's a bad situation, that I just kind of throw up my hands and go, well, that's, it's just going to be terrible, nothing I can do. It's that I no longer am wasting any time with this kind of, like, what did I do? Why did I get this flat tire? Was I bad to somebody yesterday? How can I be a better person to avoid this type of, negative consequences from God in the future and stuff? And so where I'm at now is a place where I don't have to be as concerned about all of that, right? When bad things happen, I get to focus more on the consequences of those bad things, and I get to care more about, um, how do we stop this from happening as severe, let's say, in the future. How do we take care of the problems that exist right now? Also, since the last couple of years, and I've been hopping on various channels and helping out with some people behind the scenes and just talking with more people. I've met some of the coolest people in the world. I mean, literally all over the world. I've gotten to hang out with a bunch of wonderful people, have really cool chats, really cool, experiences with in person. It's been wonderful. I've met some of the best people I've ever known in my life, being an open and very vocal atheist, agnostic, free thinker, secularist, humanist, whatever. All of those words. I don't get too bogged down in the whole divisions of everything. I know some people are like, oh, I'm not a humanist because I care about all species of
Oh
creatures. And it's
yeah.
like, great, fine, awesome. We're still probably gonna engage with most things the same way. So perfect. Don't call yourself a humanist. I don't care. Don't want to call yourself secular. I don't care. If you're not somebody that spends their whole life believing in things that we don't have good demonstration for, and you're somebody who wants to try to help this rising tide that lifts all boats, you're on my side. Whether you think, whether you have some feeling about crystals and moonlight or not, whatever you think, you got to unblock a chakra or two, fine. If you're not somebody that's out there that's literally advocating for changing the laws, in the United States, for instance, to literally criminalize an entire group of people just for who they are, you're on my side. If you're somebody that stands up for, um, you know, various rights that people have, if you're somebody who thinks it's wrong, to be criminalized just for criticizing a belief, again, you're on my side. So yeah, I mean, once I was able to really get into a headspace that I no longer had this view of the world as this cosmic battle of good and evil sitting on a knife edge, at any given
Mm.
moment the world could just turn into complete and utter chaos. Like, since I stopped believing like that, I'm just not as worried and anxious about a lot of stuff anymore. And that is really nice, because it means I can engage in more conversations that are difficult, that challenge me. And that's the reason that I've been able to change beliefs over the time period, of looking into this. There was a period of time where I very much believed more in free will. Um, then as I started looking into it, I got into a place where I was like, that doesn't really seem to be a thing that I believe anymore. And now it's okay, because
Yeah.
I can have that pushback on what I believe and who I am as a person, because I don't think that the reason this person is asking me some question is because God is trying to send me some secret message or anything. Like that's not the reason that I dropped my donut. I dropped my donut because I wasn't really holding it well, and then like I tripped, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, lot smoother since then.
Oh, no, that's so obviously I know that feeling wholeheartedly, so I completely hear what you're saying, but that was so beautifully said. Like I could not agree more. It is actually like very, very liberating to come out on the other side.
Yeah.
And that, as you said, like especially if unblocking a chakra or two involves like a hot stone massage and some good music,
Yeah,
sign
right.
me
All
up.
for it. Yeah,
I
heck
have
yeah.
no issues with that. Yeah, if you want to go to the Stonehenge at sunrise or sunset, like
Mm-hmm.
sure, I'll come along for
Mm-hmm.
the view. But I wanted to just a little thing on that was how did you reconcile not having somebody to turn to or pray to or that
Mm.
support system now when you do encounter difficult times where your go-to would have as a believer been to kneel down and pray or to pray in your heart or at least turn to God in some way?
Mm.
How have you managed to fill that I don't like to call it a void because it
Yeah.
never was there to begin with, but for what a theist would consider that we have now?
Yeah, for sure. That's a very, very good question. Because that is I think one of the things that does keep a lot of people in those types of belief systems is because there is this kind of built-in safeguard and catch-all for all these
Mhm.
issues. Even if you don't necessarily get an answer, that doesn't matter because you still kind of have that placebo effect of that kind of feeling better. It's kind of like sometimes how you just walk into the doctor's office and suddenly your arm doesn't hurt as much anymore. And it's because there's already this psychological component going on in the background where basically your body is like, hey, we know we're about to get help, you know? And so that already kind of relaxes us a little bit. Um,
It's like before you take a Panadol, you're
mm,
already like, "I'm feeling better," because
right.
it's a placebo. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Right. And that's like one of the big things is like caffeine. A lot of people, you know, drink a big thing of coffee or tea or something in the morning. And a lot of times they take one sip and then they're like, oh my gosh, I already feel energized. But that's just not how the body works. It's going to take at least 15 minutes before that's in your bloodstream. So you can't be physically, you just can't be, you know. But what one of the big things that I started doing for sure was um really trying to think about the situations more, and not in an obsessive sense, but in one where um, what I tried to do was, instead of thinking like the reason this bad thing happened, like this person is just some incarnation of evil or something, like they're just, you know, uh, they're possessed by demons or they're
Possibly,
just a bad, yeah, you know,
yeah.
some nonsense like that. I started to try and think more in this sense of like what led this person to making this action. um you know, when I feel bad, what are the things that I can do that help me, and the things that are shown to help people. And so definitely someplace like recovering from religion or the Secular Therapy Project, those types of organizations and that type of understanding of trying to say, look, what's going on inside of us is this physical thing. It's these chemicals, you know, in certain quantities. It's various neurological signals zapping around our brains and all of this. And so that's what I started putting more of my focus into. And that's been really, really helpful in a lot of different places. I've also started, you know, leaning on friends and family more too.
Nice.
And started getting into a place where I feel more comfortable, because it's always tough, you know, when you're having a bad day or, you know, you're just concerned about something. And it's one of those concerns where, you know, it's silly to be concerned about it, but for whatever reason, the little hamster in your head is just running as fast as it can and you just can't stop thinking about it. I've learned in those instances to reach out a little bit more. And say to others like, hey, this is something that I'm just like, I'm feeling bad today, like, do you have a minute, can we just chat about whatever? um but again, also just the idea of actually trying to sit down and understand and have a broader range of knowledge on any particular bad thing that happens, to try and get to a place where it's like, okay, this makes more sense to me. Because I think that's one thing that upsets us. A lot of us get upset when we just can't make sense of something. And when when it's a bad thing that we can't make sense of, right? Then it's like, oh my God, this just hurts worse, you know?
Yeah.
If somebody just steals from you, you're like, what a jerk. But if somebody steals from you and you've known this person your whole life and you know that they just lost their job and they don't have any money and they're trying to feed, you know, like they still stole from you and you still feel bad about that. And you're like, dude, I wish you would have just asked. I'd have given it to you. But the way that you feel that hurt is different. And that understanding has been really, really helpful for me. So.
Yeah, that is so, so true. Like, because again, you're taking it from a realm where things are beyond your control to now your operating field is within your control,
Yeah.
and that is empowering because you've almost got the agency back. You've not
Right.
like directed everything that's happening to like a next thing and putting this deeper meaning and significance behind it in like this grand cosmological context of where you stand and what this means for you and your personal connection with your God. Like it's wild. I think Muhammad, actually, the cult leader, has said it best. He goes, how freeing it must be to view things from the point of view of psychology and science instead of primitive superstition.
Yeah, for sure.
100% for sure.
And it feels really good to do good things for no other sake than just doing good things. All of the good stuff that I had done while I was a believer was all tainted. I wanted that goodness from doing these good things, right? I was doing these good things because I was commanded to, because my creator, who gave so much love to me and cared about me, you know, I was given this opportunity. Now, when I do good things, it's literally just because I want to do something good. And that feels really good. You get to say, whenever there is something that goes right, whenever there's something that you worked really hard for, you get to look back and say, I did this, you know, or we did this as a group. I got together with these people and we all did this awesome thing. And we don't have to attribute this to anything outside of the fact that it's good to be good. Like, it's good.
Yes, exactly. And that's not a concept that we don't like know. This is in like it's inherently in everybody.
Right.
I mean, the fact that like in Islam, especially, like it's so carrot and stick like rule. Like you're doing good things in the hope that you're getting extra brownie points so that your level of heaven can be higher. It's literally like a Mario Kart game.
I have heard some of the various Dawa people online who have said to, I swear, and I mean, you probably have heard stuff like this before, but it was something along the lines of like, if you donate now, because it's like during Ramadan or something, like you get extra points in heaven. Like, they literally said that. And I was like, oh my God, you cannot be serious. Like, you can't honestly be saying there's double rewards or something right now.
Elliot, like I lived in Saudi, right? And you know how like Hajj is one of the pillars of Islam. But if you go to Mecca in Ramadan and you do the mini pilgrimage thing, which is called Umrah, which I was only like 90 minutes from Mecca. So we would go a lot, but that is equivalent to doing the full shebang. So it's actually like, I promise you. And it gets worse. There are certain mosques which you go to, and Muhammad said, like, oh, if you read this many, however many prayers you read in this mosque is equal to that pilgrimage.
Oh my
God. And sisters just went in there. We were like up and down, like trying to get these brownie points. It's so wild.
That's so silly. Like, why would that be the case? Like, what a weird thing for God to do. God is like, hey, look, there's only like one way to like actually be spared all the pain and torment that you deserve, because again, you're a bad person. You know, the way to do that is this right here. But you could also do this like 6 times and that'll equal it. But if you do this thing like 25 times, because it's not that much, you know, but 25 of these, 6 of these, 1 of these, and it's like, well, what if I do 12 of those and like 3 of those? It's like, yeah, okay, I guess that sounds so stupid. That's
well,
we
know he loves the negotiation, clearly.
Good point. I mean, maybe Moses is up there and he's like, look, God, this is kind of equivalent, you know, like this is pretty much the same. They read a lot of verses of that Quran.
Honestly. And like it's so funny how he cares about like if it's at this time or in this space or within
Uh-huh.
these months, it's even better. Like
Hmm.
Christian Prince is quite funny. I've heard him say when he's debating a few Muslims, he'll be like, "Why is your God like a government building that shuts between these times and you can't pray to him?" Oh my
I
gosh.
love that.
But it is really like deep seated because apparently one of the first things you're going to be asked on the day of judgment is like, how much you've prayed. So prayer, like when I see Muslims, even my own family, like freak out that like time is going. I'm like, just chill, like make it up later, you know?
Hmm.
But like for them, it's actually like they are in a constant stream of like reward to, you know, thingy ratio, reward to sin ratio. Like it's
Hmm.
very much real. But I mean, bloody hell,
Wow.
even 5 times a day, who has the time for this?
Yeah, seriously. It's just so like why again, like what does it matter? Like it doesn't I don't understand. Like what are you doing? Prayer was one of those things that, eventually got to a place for me where it was like, how ridiculous is this, right? Because I mean, does anybody legitimately believe that the all powerful, all important, like this entity is gonna like change something just because you said it like 3 times instead of two? Like you just feel like you just ask once more. It's like, Mom, can I please have a cookie? And she's like, No, you gotta have dinner first. And it's like, come on, just one cookie, Mom. And it's like, no, your grandparents are coming over and you gotta eat dinner. And it's like, but just one cookie, Mom. It's like, okay, you can have one. Like, why? What the hell, Allah? Like, that's so weird. Like, you just want to wait until we're sincere enough. I don't know. It's just, I don't know. But
And at least I don't know, but at least Elliot, you could like at least like pray, I guess, in your mother tongue or like say the thoughts that were coming into your head to ask God for it. I'm telling you, we are literally just cussing out this old guy called Abu Lahab. Like that's not even art. I can only speak to God in Arabic, and I only have the like 5 things that I've memorized enough to recite over and over again. So how is that really going to get me anywhere?
I do really like the idea that like Muslim goes up to heaven and he's like standing there for a second and like, Allah or whatever is looking down. He's like, man, I don't think you cussed this guy out enough. Like you really should have been a lot more harsh to him. Like, I mean, this one was pretty bad. Like you said some pretty terrible things about him, but this other time you seem to kind of give him a pass. I just don't know if you're good. Like, what a weird criteria. Why would that be part of the criteria? Like,
Exactly. It's just, it's again
silly.
so petty and vindictive and weird
Yeah.
that you need validation from
Yeah.
humans to feel what
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
God. But also, yeah, Elliot, I wanted to ask you as we wrap up, and Ultra, I know you had joined. If you wanted to say something, I know you said you didn't want it to interrupt,
Mm.
but feel free to join. We'll definitely take you on. But after that, I think we will start wrapping it up because it's been an hour and a half, and we keep the stream short and snappy. Then I think people enjoy it more. But yeah. So Elliot, what made you kind of think, okay, all of this has gone on in my life, but let me actually be vocal about this and
Mm.
let me connect with like-minded people and you know
Yeah.
what how why YouTube?
So I spent a while, like I had said, going through kind of all the classic debates, and I had watched a lot of those for a few years. And then that was around the time where I started recognizing that there actually was like a live element to stuff and people could
Mhm.
like chat, like people could just say something in the middle of the video or whatever. And so I wanted to start engaging more in that space. I also came across somebody that lived in my area who's a Christian, who, puts on these debates. And I reached out to him and he was like, yeah, come on, let's chat about stuff. But one day I was just out there, looking at different videos and I came across something called Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist.
Yeah.
Ethan Michael is the guy who runs that. He's an absolutely great guy, and he'd been in the space for a little bit. And he just put out a message at the end of one of the videos, and he said, "Look, we need somebody to kind of help out behind the scenes." And so I just honestly, on a whim, I just reached out to him, and I was like, "Hey, man." Like you may have seen me in chat, maybe not. Like I'm kind of new to your channel, but I'd be really interested in helping out if you want. And from there, I just started getting connected with a whole bunch of other really cool places, to the point that one day we've got a few hours before the Atheist experience is going on, and they say to me, you're going to be on with Apostate Prophet, to one day where, after having spent a year or so hanging out with the Atheist Republic group and the live chat and stuff, one day Susanna sends me a message and says, hey, we would really love if you would come on once or twice. And then next thing I know, I'm co-hosting the Q&A with Armin every week, and I'm a host on Talk Heathen and Nonprofits, and I help out behind the scenes in probably half a dozen channels every week. I get to chat with awesome people like you, and Secular Spirit. He and I did a thing in Discord, just us kind of screwing around and chatting, and yeah, so far I just keep having a lot of really, really good fun. I get to keep talking about it, and I just enjoy the crap out of it, because there is a lot that really does need to still be said. I get, some places of the world, it's a bit different. Maybe this isn't something that's maybe on the ground every single day in the UK. But there are a lot of places around the world, not even just the southeast of the United States, right? I mean, we've got Iran, we've got Saudi Arabia, we've got places like Nigeria and Kenya and Malaysia. I mean, we've got places in the world where these conversations will get you killed in the street, broad daylight, in front of people, killed. And it's awesome that I live in a place where, the worst that I have is somebody interrupting my beer with a quick prayer and a tap on the shoulder. That's really about the worst of it. And that's awesome that that's the case, but we have to speak up for everybody else. We have to make sure that other people live in that safety and security as well. And so once I started getting an opportunity, it was like, hey, this gives me a chance to talk about a lot of the things that are really important to me. And hopefully somebody will listen and just kind of keep that going, and just be an extra megaphone for some of this garbage that's out there. And, I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that by the time I kick the bucket that we're going to have like world peace or anything, but it'd be really great if we could get closer to it by then. I mean, that'd be really nice. So
one generation closer at least,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Like, we have made a lot of progress in the history of humanity, right? In the whole big arc of it all. But there are some things still that happen to this day that are not only so atrocious, but also one of those things where it's like, holy crap, we could really do something. Like, we could absolutely fix this if we just gave a shit enough as a global society to do this. We can. We can get rid of these terrible things that have no value other than just harm for people. But it just takes us all talking about it where we can. And again, because I see some of the amazing things that so many of these other people do around the world, people who are imprisoned for the rest of their lives, people whose family is tormented because of this stuff, right? I see those people stepping up, and I say, look, I it's easier for me to do it. I can sit here in front of a freaking computer and talk about this shit all day. So yeah, happy to do it. Love doing it. And again, that's why I'm just so thrilled, because I get to hear so many different amazing stories and fight for really great causes. And so far, so good. Again, people still keep asking me to come on things. I figure one of these days people will get tired of me, but not yet so far, I guess.
No, I mean, because you can just tell like when people are genuinely really passionate about this. And I mean, hats off to all the work that you've been doing behind the scene. You're like vital for this movement. And once you get involved, you realize like what a small world we are, right? Like there's like a handful of us across various continents, and you see the cross collaborations because we're like, oh my God, another like you think the same way. Okay, you left religion. Like, let's just, it almost becomes like, as you were saying, like, it almost becomes, even if I can be one voice to add to this colossal megaphone that we're seeing, then it becomes a sense of duty. And actually what you find is meeting this, I guess, chosen family, if you will, or meeting people along the way, it's so cathartic.
Yeah.
as well, because in those small moments where like either you're going to church and you had to kind of hide your lack of belief, or you were figuring it out, a lot of Muslims who have to stay closeted for ex-Muslims who have to stay
Mm.
closeted for such a long time, there is a part of a lot of people's stories, I'll speak for myself, but there is a part of people's stories where you feel like, am I the only one? And
Mm.
you actually feel kind of loopy, and you
Yeah.
feel like everyone around me is subscribing to this other
Mm.
model. What's wrong with me? And you actually think that like there is something wrong with you,
Mm-hmm.
until you meet people who are like, hey, really, like I grew up in even a various different background, various different situation, but my mind was like tainted in the same way. My
Mm.
mind was like stagnated, and I think somebody here has said it beautifully. Ultra, thank you so much for your super chat, by the way. G block means godless, Elliot. So
I'm with
yeah,
it.
Ultra, yeah. I don't know what sign I was doing there, but somebody is, I think, so beautiful about what Elliot was describing about coming out of, but I'd say coming into the light. Where is it? Sorry.
Love Dean.
Yeah, I know Dean's in the house.
Yeah,
Thank you
Dean's
so
a good
much, Dean.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah, Dean is awesome. God, somebody said, I think it might have been Dean actually. Was it you that said something about you start in color and realize it's not just in black and white? I think that was a
Mm.
really, really beautiful way
Yeah.
to say it. And yeah. Um, but I think even what you said here, Infidel agrees, like, love this. Step one is
Yeah.
admitting that we have a problem and then get to work.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the same thing that Veiled Rose, I know you wholeheartedly agree, just
Mm.
using our voice against this insanity rather than bottling it up.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
That's why conversations like this are so important. 100%. Change the world one person at a time.
Mm.
That's all we can do, right? Is leave this little blue speck a little bit better than we found it.
Yeah. That's the hope. That's the hope, and there a lot of times stuff feels very daunting, right? It feels like, what can I do? And just being real, like, a single person isn't going to fix climate change, right? A single person isn't going to stop the atrocities from the Ayatollah in Iran. Like, a single
Yeah.
person isn't going to free the Uyghurs in detention camps in Western China. That's not how it works, you guys. The good news is, we don't have to be a single person. We don't have to be alone. We get an opportunity now, better than any other time in history, where we can connect together and say, look, this is crap. This is garbage and this is harmful. And we get to join together, and as a much louder voice, as a much stronger unit, we get to say, let's put an end to this garbage, and let's get to a place that is better for all of us. And that's awesome. Like, that just really, really is. And again, we don't have to do it for any hope of rewards, or any promise that we won't get punished later. We just do it because it's the right damn thing. And that's good. That's awesome. Like, a hell of a lot better than the boat we were in.
A woman, Elliot. A woman to that. I think we are pretty much wrapped up. I have this one question from Tankia. I meant to ask you this when I was touching on
Yeah.
the heaven and hell thing, but yeah, sorry. Last question, going back to your former faith, and then we'll let you go. But this has been so. Tankia was asking, do Methodists tend to be apocalyptic?
Not from my experience any more so than the standard Christian. I mean, one of the things that, again, is something that is very inherent to the Christian ideology as a whole, is this understanding that Jesus one day is coming back to take retribution on all the bad people. And so, no matter what flavor of Christianity you end up taking, you do, at the very least, have this sense inside of you. You are in the boat of understanding that at some point, may happen tomorrow, may happen 5,000 years from now, so that it doesn't affect me. But at some point, Jesus is coming back, and he's about to, kick ass and chew gum, and he's all out of gum. So it's like, but there are versions of Christianity that have a lot more focus on that. And from what I tend to experience, definitely how I was growing up Methodist, we weren't like terribly focused, other than just like the, hey, make sure you're right with God because anything could happen tomorrow, like Jesus could come back, what if you're not saved? And it's like, okay, I mean, I don't know, just ask for forgiveness right before, like, you start to see the clouds open up and Jesus is coming down, drop to your knees, be like, God forgive me, you're
Pray.
probably good. Yeah.
Okay, but like you're nothing in terms of like trying to like usher on the end times or anything like
Mm-mm.
that, right?
That's more
Okay.
of like the evangelical, like
Yes.
Christian nationalisty type. Yeah, those people are very much focused on it. They are literally a world-ending cult type thing where it's just like, oh my gosh, we're so excited. Can't you wait for the rivers of blood of all the evildoers? It's like, wow, that's pretty gross, man. Like, you really want to walk through all that? Like, these aren't like the best shoes that I'm wearing, but I don't want blood all over them. Like,
Yeah, for
anyway.
real.
Yeah, they get pretty
Oh my God.
serious about it.
They do. I mean, the Muslims aren't far off either. Like it's just waiting.
Yeah.
They're ready for that big battle with the Jews. My days. But
Blows my
thank you.
mind. I
I
mean,
know. And like for people like you and I, like we want to extend our time here and just enjoy it while it lasts, you know? Like just please chill out with that stuff.
yeah.
But Dee is also saying Secular Rarity is doing some good stuff, and
Dee's awesome. She does a lot of great stuff too. So
Dee does as
yeah,
well behind the scenes. Dee, kudos to everything you are doing for this movement.
seriously.
But Secular Rarity, where can we find you and stay, like, you know, like aware of what you're up to and come hang out with you? Are you doing anything in the
The best place here, let me see if I can get this to you.
Yeah,
Put it in our
sure.
little private chat, just my little link tree thing. The good news is it's fairly easy on all the stuff. It's just Secular Rarity. Most of the time I'm hanging out on other places. And so if you follow me on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you'll see me saying like, hey, this is where I'm going. I know within the next week, I'm going to be on both the nonprofits and Talk Heathen next Sunday. So you get like 2 whole hours of me if you really want it next Sunday.
Yay.
And Wednesdays at 10 p.m. U.S. Central Time, Armin and I do the Atheist Republic Q&A. So those are the things coming up in the near future.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, so I'm sure a lot of you here already know Armin Navabi and Atheist Republic, but please do go and subscribe. And if you haven't already, subscribe, like, share, set your notifications. Veiled Rose is saying, thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Nuria, for introducing Secular Rarity to us all. You are very welcome. I hope, you know, you guys will follow Secular Rarity's work, all of his cross collaborations. This is such a small niche space on YouTube, so everybody needs all of the support they can get. And if you enjoy one person's content, I'm sure you'll enjoy them all across the board because everybody brings their little nitty with them. I have put Secular Rarity's is it Linktree? Yeah,
Yeah, it's just one link that it has all the extra ones. All like I said, follow me on the Twitter, and then, you know, that tells you where I'm going to be next generally.
Oh, perfect. Homo sapien saying thank you, Nuria, and Secular Rarity, much love. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and everyone who supported, and for your questions and all the banter in the chat as usual. This was fun, and I hope we gave Secular Rarity a good time, enough that he'd be willing to come back at some point.
Absolutely, anytime. You hit me up anytime that I can help out with something. I loved being here. I thought this was so much fun. Yeah, like I said, I've seen a lot of your stuff, and I just really enjoy the crap out of what you do. And so just being here and getting to chat and hang out for a little bit was wonderful.
Yeah, I know, and right back at you. Like, I love this vibe. I mean, I could talk to you about any one particular part of religion for ages, but I'll definitely be in touch with you. I'm happy to, like, you know, us two to jump on, maybe have a quick call in for believers or Muslims or
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, we could do a little tag team. But yeah, if you guys are also interested in something like that, let us know in the comments. Let us know if you'd be interested in kind of like an open session forum, or you'd like me and Elliot to start discussing a topic and then we take callers on that one topic. But yeah, let us know. Thank you to all the regulars, all my mods, and most importantly to Secular Rarity, Elliot, for being here. I will see you again very shortly, I hope. But any final last words?
No, just thank you so much. And seriously, everybody out there, if you're already watching this live or in the future, you know that Nuria does amazing stuff. If you can't donate, that's okay. I understand that. But you can share it. You can click the button that says like, you can send it out to people. It is very easy, and you have no idea how much that stuff helps. So do all of that stuff. And yeah, I'm sure I'll be back here hanging out with all of y'all before too long.
100%. We are going to make that happen. So yeah, let me know in the comments as well, just the format, because I definitely love energy. Veiled Rose is saying, yeah, you both chatting to believers would be great in a live stream. Okay, well, Veiled Rose, your wish is our command, if you like. Tarek, thank you for stopping by. You did just miss it, but yeah, go ahead and rewatch and let us know what you think. But thank you so much for being here. Bye, Shaquille. Bye, John. Bye, Elliot. Bye, everybody. Till next time. See ya.